proud to present to you our new concept fabric, Joy On.
We need something else. A lot of the backlash has come from the family.
Your family?
The customers.
The company. Its precious family are safe in your hands.
We don't have an ethical crisis.
So what are we having?
We are having an authenticity crisis. Find me a guru. Ingention, wow, sounds just like intention.
English and Hindi are both Indo-Aryan languages.
I'm getting so much out of this already.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the San Francisco Playhouse, our community's empathy gym, and to our series of fireside chats with some of our community and our nation's greatest playwrights. Really thrilled to be here with you tonight. One of my very favorite playwrights, and one that we've done quite a bit of work with. We started out working with this playwright in our Sandbox series with a play called The Rules. And then we did another Sandbox that we were just talking about called In Brownout, both of which were very challenging plays, and plays that challenge our expectations about how certain people should behave and what is standard acceptable behavior for people. And then we did a play on our main stage, which we were thrilled to present and lucky enough to be able to take our entire production down to another theater in Southern California and put it up again. And of course, that play was Yoga Play, which many of you saw and were thrilled to be there. And so it's my tremendous pleasure at this time to introduce you to Dipika Guha.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. So good to see you. You're a sight for sore eyes.
Yeah, so good to see you. Thank you for having me in this box as we speak to each other, our respective rectangles.
In our little boxes.
Yeah.
And you're in Los Angeles right now.
I am. Yes, I am.
And tell everybody what you're doing down there.
I am writing on a show here called Overlooked. It's based on the New York Times obituary column, also called Overlooked. And it's a column that they publish of mostly women and people of color who they overlooked writing obituaries for at the time of their death. So some of these people are well known to us. Ida B. Wells didn't get an obituary, neither did Sylvia Plath. And some of the people that we're telling the stories of are less well known. And it's being produced by President Obama's company, Higher Ground, through Netflix.
What a tremendous idea. I have always loved that column.
Well,
I read it religiously, and I'm always aghast and amazed at the great people who failed to get their obituary. In a way, the Times is examining their own failures.
Yes, and acknowledging, claiming them, yeah. And we're asking a lot of questions about what recognition means for people, what it means to get it, to not get it during your lifetime, how it affects the bodies of work of artists that we're looking at, and how to tell a story about worth that is beyond achievement.
Right. Yeah, the intrinsic value of the work.
Exactly.
The value of the work to the person who does it.
Exactly, particularly for some communities and women in particular, where women's lives were overlooked for so long. There's no great documentation for one, and how to communicate the worth of someone who matters to the people around them and their community, that holds value, is an argument that we are very carefully making through the series.
And there's no shortage of under-recognized women.
Yes, yes, there are hundreds of stories, and that's been a big part of the process to settle on which ones we're going to tell in this first season. And it's been a very challenging but rewarding process.
So this is a new LA writing gig for you.
Yes, it is. It's new.
You were on another series down there for 2 or 3 years, right?
I've been on several different shows. This is my 5th show.
Wow.
Yeah. So lots of different kinds of experiences. I was on a comedy called Black Monday on Showtime, which was about Wall Street in the 80s, and a sort of tragicomic tone, which is also extremely fun, and people should check it out.
So we got to know each other doing a bunch of plays together.
Yes.
Starting with The Rules, and then in Brownout, and then Yoga Play. What was that like? How did you feel about those processes, the sandbox process and the main stage process? They were all different.
Yeah, well, I'm so grateful that you gave my work a home in the Bay Area, and the Sandbox is such a wonderful place to experiment. And it gave me a lot of space to develop those plays. And so I'm particularly thankful to you and the Bay Area community of actors, and Susanna Martin, who directed 2 of those shows, and the actors who, did workshops with us before those productions. So the Sandbox is like a very short process. So those are definitely workshop productions, and felt like first impulse, sort of in a way following a first impulse, because we have like 2 weeks, I think. Sandbox, 2.5 weeks.
Rehearsal? No, there's 4 weeks. 4 weeks of rehearsal.
In my memory, it's 2.
Well, you were only there for 2 of them, I think.
maybe. They're very short anyway, the process of working on those plays, and so it does feel like a full expression of a first impulse, I guess.
Right.
And the main stage obviously was like a much fuller, much more realized, realized version.
I think we selected in Brownout when you'd only written half of it.
Yeah.
We'd only seen half the play. And it was a lot of work finishing that play. It was hard for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was an unexpected, I didn't mean to write that play. It came through me. I started writing it before Charlottesville. And then when Charlottesville happened, that was part of what delayed it, I think, because it was like an articulation. It was worse than anything I could have imagined happening in that time. And so I think it stopped me for a moment. And it was, I remember during one workshop, one of the audience members who we did a public reading, I think maybe if whatever I had, whatever pages I had.
I think it was one of our Monday night reading series, and I think we did that reading without having the play still wasn't completed.
It still wasn't done, and he said to me, "Oh, events are going to outstrip your writing." He was like, "How are you going to finish this?" And I was like, "Well, maybe," but of course the play has a more mythic shape to it, which was sort of what I was interested in terms of the questions I was asking about the nature of evil, and how white supremacy, but also how power works, were some of the questions that play was looking at. But I used the process in Brownout in particular. I used our process to finish writing that play.
Right. Well, it does seem as if events may have outstripped the play. Perhaps.
Maybe.
I mean, very recent events, maybe not. I guess it's still mythical, right? I like what you mean by mythical is eternal.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
An eternal struggle between good and evil.
Yeah. And also there are supernatural elements in the play, and I think that are symbolic or emblematic of ideas that are very difficult to grasp, because as soon as we start to see them as human people, we lose our compassion often in our desire to see justice done. I don't think these questions are simple, and I'm always eager to look at what does it look like in the mirror? What does evil look like when you're looking at your own face? Where do our blind spots exist? I mean, it's sort of the most we can do right now is to own that, I think.
That's what we're trying to do. You know, what is your take on the current reflection of some of the themes from Brownout that are happening and that have happened in the past few weeks?
Well, that play is about sort of liberal good intentions coming face to face with white supremacy and people who hold those beliefs, and about what happens in that confrontation. And it's interesting because in that play, the white supremacists are trying to infiltrate this sort of tightly knit liberal couple, and the husband is convinced that he can convince and infiltrate through infiltration himself, and change the mind of the man who is the white supremacist in that conversation. And so, I mean, that is what is happening. That is what happened in Minneapolis in terms of the infiltration of very well organized white supremacist groups who infiltrated the protests a couple of weeks ago after George Floyd was murdered. And so, yeah, I think it wasn't abstract to me then when I thought about what's the micro version of what is it is the micro version of what is happening now,
Right.
all over the country. And of course, many good things are happening. That's not to say that they're not, and people are raising their voices in positive ways, but we are seeing it happen. And so it's not new, I guess. We've been in this conversation for a long time. I do wonder how the play would, I don't know what you think, how the play would read differently now.
I think it would be pretty scary. I think it was scary when we did it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary when we did it, yeah.
But I think in a way people weren't really quite, a lot of people weren't quite willing to go all the way with it. Do you agree?
I do agree, yeah.
And I pushed it back.
Yeah.
Audience, people would push it back and try to dismiss it as being not believable or not realistic, or
Yeah.
I don't think today they'd be able to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Should do it again.
Maybe we could do a Zoom version. Speaking of which, what about this crazy time we're living in where we don't get to be together? And are you working on any new plays? Have you had any new Zoom readings or?
Yeah, I was in a process at the Playwright Center with a new play called Getting There that is for New Conservatory Theater Center in San Francisco, actually. Ed Decker commissioned it a few years ago, and we were due to do a reading on Zoom 3 weeks ago, and it was the week that the murder happened. Mm-hmm. And so the process kind of became us sort of sitting with what was happening, and the question, in addition to rehearsing the play, which the actors did sort of beautifully and with great commitment every day, their city was on fire.
Right.
And it became a question of, is it right to continue to do the work?
Right.
And so we sat on Zoom and held space for each other, and people spoke about what they were going through a little bit. And we decided to cancel the public aspect of the reading that we saw through the workshop, because the reading was scheduled on Friday, and Thursday night, one of the staff members at the Playwright Center was evacuated from her home. And it just felt like it was too large what was happening. People really needed to protect their energies. And Lily Tongue Crystal was also in the reading and had so much to think about in terms of her theater. And they had a lot of programming scheduled that weekend, which she canceled. And she was reasoning through all of that as well. You know, what's the ethical thing to do in a moment where what's happening in the world it feels so larger than usual.
Yes, it does feel like, doing a reading or doing a play seems kind of beside the point somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly dwarfs our understanding of the moment. I think that it's hard to have perspective when we're all so close to it now, I think. It's certainly energy sapping. I'm very tired. I don't know about you.
I'm exhausted. I've
Yeah.
been exhausted. To me, the events that have happened and all of there's been George Floyd, and then all of that incredible tragedy and just this suffering around that. I felt completely overwhelmed by it. But the gathering of so many people, such huge protests and marches, and the fact that they've gone on and on and on like they have in such a great way, and it started lifting me back up. And I thought, wow, if this many people and 20,000 people in Australia and England and France and other places have joined this to say, this is enough. This is just enough. We've had it. We can't take it anymore, and we have to change it. And it feels more like a real revolution, I hope, than it ever has before.
And
having lived through I'm dating myself, but having lived through the late 60s and early 70s, when there was so much protesting and rioting and great leaders being assassinated and struggle, it seems different now, and I'm not quite sure how.
What's your advice to theater people in this moment? What do you think we should do?
I feel like we just need to sort of change everything. We need to kind of, in a way, break down a lot of what we believe to be so about American theater and rebuild. I think we need to look long and hard at what we've been doing and what we think we've accomplished, and we need to be a force for change.
That's heartening.
And we need to look ourselves, hard in the mirror. And I know I do need to look myself in the mirror, and for all of my good intentions, I've made many mistakes, and can learn and listen. Learn and listen.
And we certainly will have time to do that, it looks like. We may have...
I was just gonna say, we're not scrambling to put up a show every 6 weeks, so I think we have time to kind of gather, to collect our wits and our grief and our humility, as sort of like white producers of theater. and just try to move forward. To hear the voices of Black Lives Matter and all the other voices that are needing a platform.
Yeah, and it's every part of theater making, isn't it? It's the writing, it's the scenic design, it's sound design, it's sort of every
Right.
aspect.
Right, and I think in some areas of theater, San Francisco Playhouse has done well in terms of representation and diversity and inclusion. In other areas, we've not done well at all. And I think that we can do better. And I think we will.
And that does seem like the best use of this moment, because it's really hard I think for all of us as theater practitioners to catch a breath when things are going.
Yeah, and take the time to really listen, and then take the time to do the research that is required to find people of color that we can bring into the organization more than we have.
And there's so much talent in the Bay Area. There's no dearth of it, so that's exciting.
No. Yes. There's a lot of it's a rich community, and not just with playwrights, but with actors and designers. And I think the new leaders, I think volunteer leaders, volunteer leaders is in board. The board is a place where we need to do a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I was looking at the count today, the statistics about who's produced. The Dramatists Guild put out this count every year, and the WGA also released their equity and inclusion statistics a couple of weeks ago, and it's sort of on par. I mean, at the last count, 85% of theater productions in the US are by white writers, and that was the end of 2018, I think. And it's 80% of showrunners currently, though there's more parity at the lower levels, which tells its own story, I think, about what happens as you progress. But yeah, there's certainly a great deal of room for improvement, and I'm very interested in what kinds of structures that we can create while we're on pause to begin having these conversations as a community. Yeah, how can we talk to each other?
Yeah. Oh, I think we just need to take more actions.
Yeah.
I think it's all about action,
Yeah.
To put our empathy into action. Because it's actions are how we will be judged, or how we will be evaluated, and how we evaluate ourselves, There's been a lot of challenges to all the theaters that have put out statements of, solidarity and such. Okay, so now what? Now what are you going to do? And I hear that, and I resemble that remark.
Yeah, and I think that's right, to sort of try to map out what the road ahead looks like.
And set goals and meet them,
Yeah.
I think really hearing people, asking for people to tell you what they think, and then hearing them.
So it could be good. It could be good in
It'll
a
be
year
good.
and a half's time, maybe 2 years.
It will be
A
good.
lot to look forward to in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I want this not to be just sort of forgotten in a couple of months or weeks or whatever, when something rises up and wakes everybody up. And then I do want it to be a revolution. I hope it changes our culture for the good. And not just with theaters, but in terms of the whole revolution with policing our cities and with the prison industrial complex that has gotten so completely out of hand.
I mean, it's certainly incredible, as you were saying, that the ripple effect that this has had globally, and the fact that people are identifying with the struggle in the U.S. so closely, I think, says a lot about, in Britain certainly, where my family lives, there's a lot of conversation about police violence there and how it's the same. And we've heard the words, "I can't breathe," from young Black men in the UK. It just has never gotten this kind of exposure. And I think, this has sort of blown the lid on systemic racism in the UK. I think the backlash has been pretty grave there, as we can see with the statues and everything. But that's the conversation that's happening now. But I do think it's pretty incredible, and I hope we have good cause to imagine that this will take us into the next decade. That the change that's being seeded now will carry.
All right. Well, only we can make that happen. Right? It's not going to just happen. And it's in a way, the fact that it's coincidental relationship to our kind of being fallow, being unable to present. I'm not quite sure how that's going to impact change, because we're down, and we're trying to survive. We're trying to
Yeah.
hold on to our spaces and hold on to really just a few key employees. We're not sure when we're going to be able to produce, but we do have time to work on infrastructure and change in a kind of, maybe in a laboratory kind of way, where the stakes aren't, I don't mean the stakes, but where the pressure cooker of producing constantly.
Yeah.
When do you have time to really go out and find designers of color and board members? When you're producing, you're just constantly producing, And so maybe this will help. Maybe this will help theaters really take a look at some of those places where they're missing the boat or where they can improve.
Yeah, I hope so.
We'll look at it that way.
Yeah, I hope so. Given that we can't actually sit next to each other and watch something unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it's a great use of this time.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, we're very practiced in patience because things take so long to come to fruition on the one hand in the theater, and on the other hand, we're not practiced because we're always so busy.
That's kind of that's generally what I mean. We're busy and things get swept under the rug, or things. I don't mean to make an excuse at all, but maybe this will help us. Maybe the time we have will give us an opportunity.
Yeah, I hope so. we'll know in a couple of years' time.
We will. We'll reconvene.
Reconvene and talk about whether we've succeeded or failed.
Well, it isn't really so much about succeeding or failing. I think it's just, like you said, you were talking about the women that you have been helping the New York Times bring to life that didn't get an obituary. It's about the work and doing the work and putting your heart and your soul into the work, right? Rather than the result. I guess results help.
Yeah. And I guess the story that we're reaching for is one that the pandemic has illustrated, that we're all connected. And quite literally in this instance. And that progress is not linear, it's circular. And one can't see it. I'm sort of being facile when I say we'll know in 3 years. We may not know in 300. But that doesn't mean that we're not impacting each other. And we're thinking a lot about that. What's the dramatic kind of expression of that?
What is that? Yeah, the facts are, for the first time in history, the world, the entire population of the human race knows that we're in this together. We're all fighting exactly the same foe, or dealing with the same problems, suffering the same tragedies caused by the same virus. We feel like that has to result in some sort of coming together, even though it doesn't always seem to. We'll hope that that's the case. And you just said, I'm just going to let you go pretty soon here, but you said something about the dramatic expression. And you know how one of my pet theories is that playwrights are the prophets of our time. They're the people that have more sensitive antenna, I think, and you're able to pull down information, tumult, that you can somehow, through some miracle, translate into a story which helps us to see ourselves, to create that mirror.
Yeah.
As sort of a parting remark, or a parting thought for our viewers and listeners, what do you imagine anything that the drama or theater or playwrights are going to be addressing? Or
I don't know. I don't know what's
I didn't put you on the spot.
I do think that this time has blown us all open in a way that I think if there wasn't before, I'm anticipating some greater fidelity towards one's own personal truth. And we've all been sort of stripped of any illusions that we were holding on to. I think this period has taken away many things. And that, I think, leaves us as writers perhaps more of an open channel in some ways. We're also always complaining about other people and noise and other obligations which we've not had. So maybe the silence, will aid whatever expression comes. But certainly we've been talking about Liz Gilbert has this idea about inspiration or genius as an energy that flows through you. It's not something that you are, it's something that you're a conduit for and a channel for. And so, I suppose that's the best we can hope for, that the pipes are cleared in some sense.
Yeah, I love the way you said has blasted us open.
Mm.
That's, I think, a really pretty fair way to put it, both with the, with the COVID experience and, with the George Floyd experience and everything that's come in its wake. It's really blasted us open. I don't know that audiences, when we come back, will tolerate anything but just raw human experience in its kind of rawest form.
Yeah, and I have no appetite for sentimentality, so I I hope that's reflected in the art that comes. That it's devoid of manipulation in that way.
Right, right. There's no pat storytelling or pat characterizations or artificially created plot devices, or because I think we're going to have more well-developed crap detectors,
Mm, mm. Perhaps, yeah, yeah. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Well, hopefully when you and I will think about that more and figure out what kind of truth we can put on stage, unvarnished and raw and blown open.
Yeah, I'm deeply curious about what this time will bring, and certainly there's been a kind of naturalism in American theater for a very long time, um, and I'm interested to see if formally we start to see more expressionistic work or different, what this does for formal experimentation um, to describe this kind of blasted openness and
Right.
and quite and all of the pain that hopefully will bring transformation, but is nevertheless painful in the moment.
Amen to that. Well, Dipika, it's been such a tremendous pleasure sitting with you for a while, talking about all these things. I'm feeling very moved and very honored by all of your thoughts and feelings and that you've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Bill, as ever.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. Deeply appreciated. Take care.
Yes, you too.
Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the amazing and brilliant, insightful Dipika Guha and her thoughts on the times we live in and the nature of our theater, the nature of art, and our responsibilities to work both as artists and citizens in this time. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week. We're going to be visiting with Michael Gene Sullivan, who is one of our Bay Area's most wonderful artists as an actor, as a director, as a playwright, as an artistic director, and as a human. We love Michael. Worked with many of you, have seen him on our stage and been to the mime troupe and seen the incredible work that he's done with that group and with the writing. And so I hope you will come back next week for a conversation with Michael Gene. Thank you very much. Good evening.